Hello, I'm John Rossi, a touring drummer with a love of all things animal. When I'm on the road, I visit as many zoos, aquariums... Hey, wait a minute. What's going on? Hey, what's going on there? Hello? Hello? Hello?
We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you Rossifari Zoo news. News you can use from the world of zoos and conservation. Every week, we bring you breaking news and analysis from around the globe, featuring the animals you love and the people who care for them. And here's your anchorman, John Rossi.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to Rossifari Zoo News, your look at everything going on in the world of zoos, aquariums, conservation, and general animal weirdness. Y'all, I am sick. I have been so sick this week. I was pretty sure that I had COVID, which I have not had COVID, and I'm very proud of that fact for some weird reason. But I tested negative repeatedly, so I guess I don't have COVID. But I have had the worst flu or cold or whatever crazy mutant death bug has been attacking me. Man, I'm recording this on Thursday, and this is the fifth straight day that I have been completely wiped out by this bug. Things are getting better slowly, and I am appreciative of that fact. But yeah, it has been one of those weeks where I'm so sick that I can't function. I really haven't left the house. It's just been insane. I'm just not like that, ever. When I get sick, I usually figure it out. So yeah, that has been my week. But the other thing that I wanted to tell y'all was that, last week, I know that I put out my special edition Zoo News about some of the things that had gone wrong recently at a couple facilities and talking about FOIA and all of that. And wow, the response to that has been overwhelming. A lot of y'all checked it out, and I'm grateful for that. I did find out that it was shared on some AZA listservs and stuff as a very positive message and everything. So I hope that y'all really appreciated that, because, man, that episode really took off. And I know I said I would try to get out some more normal Zoo Newsy stuff, but well, then I ended up basically feeling like I was dying, so I didn't. But don't worry, we have a really good, really deep Zoo News episode this week with lots of stuff to talk about. So I think I've said all I've got to say about this week, so let's get to it. All right, so our top story this week is the release of the USA Today top 10 lists that pertain to this podcast. Now, I know I have mentioned frequently that I find this to be an exercise in futility for a variety of reasons. Almost no one has been to all of the zoos that are nominated. The list and nominees change every year, which seems kind of ridiculous since zoos barely change year to year. Maybe opening one new exhibit or getting a few new smaller species in each year. It's mostly just a contest to see who can get the most people to vote for their zoo, with some places asking daily, some facilities having their member groups take up the charge, and some places pretending the vote doesn't exist at all. With all that said, it does seem like zoos took it more seriously this year. I saw multiple facilities post about it that never had before, a few more post daily about it, and I actually have been told by multiple sources that some facilities actually pumped real money into marketing the contest, trying to make it into the top 10 for the first time or to improve their standing. So, since the facilities involved seem to want to take it seriously, I suppose it is worth mentioning as the top story this week. So, here are your winners in the best overall zoo category. Number 10, ZooMontana. And we are going to pause here to share what a huge win for ZooMontana this is. 9 years ago, with a relatively new director in Jeff Ewelt, they were facing a financial crisis. The most likely outcome was that the zoo would close. And while saving the zoo was the first and most immediate goal, Ewelt took it a lot further than that. they brought in a bunch of new animals, improved community outreach, both to educate and, honestly, to remind people that the zoo was there, and improved the zoo so much that in 2019 they became AZA accredited, something that seemed close to impossible when Ewelt took over the zoo. And making the top 10 for USA Today is impressive not just for those reasons, but because Montana isn't exactly the most populated part of the country. To be able to muster enough votes to be rated number 10 on this list shows exactly how invested the community is in the zoo now, something that Jeff and his team should be incredibly proud of. And in fact, I was so excited to read all about this and the amazing changes at the zoo that I reached out to Jeff. And the day this episode goes live, if all goes well, I will be interviewing him about that and bringing that episode to you on Tuesday. Now, no promises, because y'all know how crazy stuff can get sometimes, but that is the goal, and I am looking forward to that chat. All right, moving on with the rest of the list. Number 9 is the St. Louis Zoo. Number 8 is the San Diego Zoo. Number 7 is the Audubon Zoo in New Orleans. Number 6 is our friends at the Brevard Zoo in Melbourne, Florida. Number 5, Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Number 4, our friends at the Honolulu Zoo in Hawaii. Number 3, some more friends of the pod, the North Carolina Zoo in Asheboro, North Carolina. Number 2, even more friends of the pod, the Cincinnati Zoo in Ohio. And then number 1 this year, for the second year in a row, is Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo and Aquarium. And I know for a fact that the Omaha people and the Cincinnati people both were really into it. They have their private groups that vote daily, and it was quite the competition last year and this year, but both times Omaha pulled off the victory. So congrats to the Henry Dorley Zoo, and they really are an amazing facility. And then there are a couple other top 10 lists that pertain here. The best zoo exhibit category was rated as follows. Number 10, Glacier Run at the Louisville Zoo with sea lions, Steller's sea eagles, and bears, including a wonderful polar bear exhibit. Number 9, the David A. Straz Jr. Manatee Critical Care Center at Zoo Tampa, the first ever critical care center for manatees, which was founded back in 1991. Number 8, Sanctuary Asia at the Oklahoma City Zoo, which features Indian rhinos, Komodo dragons, elephants, and more. Number 7, Toyota Elephant Passage at the Denver Zoo, featuring elephants, rhinos, Malayan tapirs, clouded leopards, fishing cats, gibbons, small-clawed otters, and more. Number 6, the new Red Panda Ridge at the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo in Indiana, featuring red pandas and, well, possibly other stuff, but who cares, because red pandas. Number 5, the Simon Skjat, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I don't care if I'm saying that right. The Simon guy who made enough money to have an exhibit named after him, International Orangutan Center at the Indianapolis Zoo in Indiana. This features orangutans, including a canopy trail the orangs can use to soar high above the exhibit. Number 4, Australian Adventures at the Living Desert Zoo and Gardens in Palm Desert, California. This features wallabies, emus, and kookaburras. Number 3 is Night Hunters at the Cincinnati Zoo, which is their indoor nocturnal building featuring binturongs, clouded leopards, the black-footed cat, fennec foxes, ringtails, aardvarks, aardwolves, and more. Only place I've ever seen aardwolves, I think. Number 2, Rocky Mountain Wild at Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, which has moose, mountain lions, Canada lynx, grizzly bears, and more, all in natural environments carved out of the natural landscape the zoo sits on, since the animals are all native to the area. And then number 1, our friends in Omaha did it again, the Desert Dome at Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo in Omaha, Nebraska, which features a bunch of reptiles, birds, and mammals from 3 distinct areas, the Namib Desert, the Sonoran Desert, and the Red Center of Australia. And one thing I find interesting about this voting is that the top 3 exhibits are all at facilities that made the top 5 zoos list, but that the other ones are not. Shows which zoos had the biggest voting blocks and which ones didn't, but got enough people to support one thing or another. Just an interesting observation, especially remembering how some online groups for certain zoos tried really hard to win it all for their facilities. And then there's one more category that pertains this year because for some reason they didn't do Best Zoo Lights or Best Aquarium this year, but they did do the Best Safari Park category, which came out as follows. Number 10, the B. Bryan Preserve in Point Arena, California. Number 9, Keystone Safari in Grove City, Pennsylvania. Number 8, Bearizona Wildlife Park in Williams, Arizona. Number 7, Lion Country Safari in Loxahatchee, Florida. Number 6, The Wilds, which is owned by the Columbus Zoo in Cumberland, Ohio. Number 5 is Safari West in Santa Rosa, California. Number 4 is the San Diego Zoo Safari Park in Escondido, California. Number 3 is another friend of the podcast, Fossil Rim Wildlife Center in Glen Rose, Texas. Number 2 is Turpentine Creek Wildlife Refuge in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And number 1 is the Lee G. Simmons Wildlife Safari Park in Ashland, Nebraska. Nebraska is apparently killing it with the voters, y'all. That's just impressive. But yeah, so those are the results of those polls, and that brings us to our births and deaths this week. And I'm going to do this in a bit of a rapid-fire format since we skipped this last week. So there are a lot, and honestly, we'll have to pick up some of them next week. Elmwood Park Zoo has announced the birth of 3 baby peccaries, or pecklets, which is a huge win for the species. They are incredibly endangered, and they don't actually feature in a lot of zoos, but Elmwood Park has had success breeding them before, and that success continues this year. Reed Park Zoo in Tucson, Arizona has announced the birth of a healthy elephant calf whose sex has not yet been determined. The calf seems to be doing well, bonding with the entire herd. Tanganyika Wildlife Park has announced the birth of 2 baby giraffes to their herd, which is one of the largest in the country. 2 births around the same time is super exciting. The San Antonio Zoo has announced the birth of an emerald starling chick. The egg was actually found lying on the ground outside the parent's nest, where quick-acting staff were able to grab it and take it to an incubator, successfully caring for the egg until the starling hatched. And I always love stories like that. And hey, speaking of birds, the Cincinnati Zoo has announced the birth of a little blue penguin chick. Since they are already called little blues, maybe this one should be called a littler blue? I think I actually made that joke on here already. Well, if so, now I guess I made it again. There is an incredible birth to announce at ZooMontana, where a wolverine kit was born recently, the 3rd one born at the zoo. Wolverines are such cool and weird little animals, and I wish more zoos would have them, but it's awesome to see the breeding success ZooMontana is having with them, and apparently with everything right now, which is pretty cool. The San Diego Zoo Safari Park announced the hatching of a kiwi chick, the 3rd ever in the park's history. It looks like a coconut with legs and spends nights snacking on tiny meatballs that are handmade by its care team, so I'd say it's doing pretty well so far. The Oakland Zoo has welcomed Jasiri, the latest Hamadryan baboon, to the troop. The name is East African, and it means brave. The Phoenix Zoo has welcomed 2 Dalmatian chicks to the zoo. Wait. Dalmatian chicks? That doesn't make... Oh, Dalmatian pelican chicks. That's the ticket. 2 Dalmatian pelican chicks hatched there. Now it makes sense. Also, pellets are adorable. Get it, pellets. Pellets is a real word. Anyway. The Little Rock Zoo has announced the birth of twin blue-eyed black lemurs. Now, twins only occur in about 4% of blue-eyed black lemur births, so that is particularly exciting. And then, last but not least, in the births, a new model of okapi has been constructed at the Dallas Zoo, made from the spare parts of some giraffe, horses, and zebra. Wait, crap. I forgot I learned that okapi are actual animals. All right, let me try this again. An okapi calf, or okaplet, has been born at the Dallas Zoo. It is doing really well and is absolutely adorable and is 100% real, as all okapi are, allegedly. And then we turn to the solemn subject of death. And we start off with a real heartbreaker for me, as ZooAtlanta has announced the passing of Ruby, one of the red pandas at the zoo. Ruby was only 3 years old when she was discovered deceased by her care team, an experience I can't even imagine enduring. Preliminary necropsy results indicate her death may have come from a mesenteric torsion, an often fatal condition that occurs when an animal's intestines twist. There may be additional findings as the various test results from the necropsy come back, but sending love to the entire team at ZooAtlanta. Stella, the striped skunk, passed away recently at Zoo America in Hershey. She was 10 years, 7 months old, an incredible age for a species that lives an average 2 to 3 years in the wild. Stella was an education animal for many years, traveling to introduce students and others to the species and demystify what many people see as a local nuisance species. She then retired to become an exhibit animal, making her the rare animal that was cared for by both the education and animal care teams at the zoo, all of whom will miss her greatly. The Henry Vilas Zoo has announced the death of Bam Bam, the 24-and-a-half-year-old Indian-crested porcupine. Now, 24 and a half is an incredible age for an Indian-crested porcupine to reach. And on a personal note, I had the opportunity to meet Bam Bam when I last visited the zoo, and he was an incredible animal even at his advanced age. Now, due to that age, Bam Bam battled arthritis, dental disease, hearing loss, and vision loss, and in the end, his quality of life declined to the point where the decision was made to euthanize him. Still, what an incredible testament to the care received in his long, long life. The Beardsley Zoo has announced the loss of Cricket, a female golden lion tamarin. Now, Cricket was only 6 years old, and she passed immediately following an unviable birth. In some ways, this feels like the most human-like of these stories because the birthing process and risks associated with it are very similar for all primates, including humans. The Detroit Zoo has said goodbye to Whisker, a 21-year-old North American river otter. Whisker was rescued and deemed non-releasable back in 2003 and found a forever home at the Detroit Zoo in 2009. She was a superb mother who not only gave the zoo their first otter birth in 50 years, but also did a great job as a partner and a mother. She will be missed by the staff and the romp of otters that live at the zoo. Riverbanks Zoo has announced the passing of Isabel the giraffe. Isabel was a giraffe that had a lot of health problems in her life and was the reason the zoo started taking plasma donations from other giraffes, a process that continues to this day. So, in that way, Isabel has helped save many other giraffes, which is pretty cool, but she will be greatly missed. And then last but not least in this section, the Phoenix Zoo has announced the decision to humanely euthanize Bo, a male cheetah who was 10 years old. Bo developed hind limb weakness and partial paralysis, which progressed rapidly, which was discovered during the necropsy to be because of an aggressive and untreatable tumor that developed in the bone of his caudal vertebral column. Poor guy, he will be missed. And now we move on to the rest of the Zoo News section. So we start this section within a section by giving all the props to the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago for sharing a bunch of transparent updates about what's been going on with Lomalok, one of the African lion cubs recently born at the zoo. Now, Lomalok seemed normal until he started walking, at which point he was not walking properly on his back legs. The vet team stepped in and did diagnostics, but they weren't able to find anything abnormal, so they teamed up with MedVet Chicago to do a deeper dive. MedVet discovered a narrowing of the nerve channels near his back legs where the nerves were compressed, so his muscles weren't developing properly, and he also had some pain issues and communication issues between the legs and the brain. They were able to medically manage the problem for a while, but it became less effective over time, and then a disc slipped in the area, which all but completely blocked the nerves from working. As such, they did surgery at MedVet. The teams worked together to perform the surgery, and it appears as though it has gone well. Lomalok woke up, ate food, went to the bathroom, all the normal things that vets look for when an animal comes out of a major surgery like this. He has even stood up on his own for the first time. And while that is cool in and of itself, throughout the entire experience, the zoo has been carefully updating fans on social media, even showing videos of the surgery and Lomalok in early recovery. It's going to be a long road back to what will hopefully be full health for him, and at this time there are still a lot of potential setbacks that can occur, but I love the transparency the zoo has shown during this time, and love that it seems to be going well for the little guy so far. Here's hoping for more good news for Lomalok. I'm grateful that zoos go to such lengths to keep their animals healthy and to improve their quality of life as much as possible. And we're actually going to stick to that topic for a moment for the next few stories. This next one is from Woodland Park Zoo, where a gorilla was recently discovered to be pregnant. Akenji will be a first-time mom at the age of 22, and she was also born at Woodland Park Zoo. Because of that and good record keeping, the keeper team knows that Akenji was not shown appropriate maternal behaviors after being born, as her mother was not interested in her. A foster mom at another zoo was found, but since Akenji was not raised by her own mom, the team at the zoo is working with her now to prepare her for raising a baby. They are doing target training to have her pick up a burlap, quote, baby doll and bring it to her breast to practice feeding, and also to present it to gorilla staff if supplemental feedings become necessary once the baby comes along. Now, since Akenji lives in a large troop that has other juvenile gorillas, the team knows she is aware of how gorillas grow, and the team has even seen her interacting well with other young gorillas, even letting them ride on her back. So as long as she is able to master the raising of her own young and get this feeding process down, there is a really good chance that she will go on to become a great mom. If this training works, it could easily spread to other zoos, as one of the biggest concerns for baby gorillas is finding an appropriate surrogate mother if the birth mother just doesn't want to or know how to raise a baby. This could truly be a game changer in that department. And sticking on that topic for one more story, the New England Aquarium recently released some photos of an African penguin named Pico, who receives acupuncture treatments to help relieve spinal discomfort. Pico is 30 years old, so it is not unexpected that she has spinal and joint inflammation, and the acupuncture seems to help with these issues. Who knew that penguin acupuncturist could be a career? Oh, and while we're on the topic of penguins, it is officially time for March of the Penguin Madness. You can go to the social media pages of Penguins International to vote for your favorite penguins from a variety of zoos and aquariums around the globe. Now, there are many friends of the pod involved, including Greensboro Science Center, the Columbus Zoo, Adventure Aquarium, the Cincinnati Zoo, the Mississippi Aquarium, Lehigh Valley Zoo, Akron Zoo, the Jacksonville Zoo, Shedd Aquarium, and ABQ Biopark. So go vote for your favorite penguins and make sure that your favorite penguins are the facilities that have been on the podcast. The Denver Zoo has announced the launch of some new wildlife conservation programs in Southeast Asia. These programs will be working to protect Asian elephants, Sumatran orangutans, and northern white-cheeked gibbons. The zoo will be partnering with local conservation organizations to ensure that they engage the community at a local level while working to save these species, which I think is just the best way to do it. So mad props to the Denver Zoo. And while we are in Colorado for a moment, the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo has announced something pretty amazing. Now, Cheyenne Mountain is one of those facilities that does the whole Quarters for Conservation program, where, depending on the facility, either a quarter or 50 cents of every admission goes directly into a conservation fund that is then redistributed to conservation causes. Well, Cheyenne Mountain Zoo's Quarters for Conservation program has now officially donated over $5 million to conservation efforts around the globe. That is a lot of quarters, like 20 million of them, because that's how math works. But yeah, seriously, congrats to Cheyenne Mountain Zoo on this incredible milestone, and here's to many, many more. An interesting study came out recently, which looks at one of the great debates happening at zoos and aquariums around the country and the world right now. How important is it for enrichment items to look naturalistic? The movement towards this kind of enrichment is often sparked by discussions about how zoo guests view enrichment. Most animals that are in zoos and aquariums don't come from the wild anymore, so they don't really have a sense of what would be natural to them. And as someone who spends a lot of time with rescued and unreleasable sea lions and seals, I can tell you that often, even animals that come from the wild still love interacting with enrichment that does not look like it comes from Mother Earth. In brief, the study found that enrichment items being used are what influences guest attitudes, regardless of how naturalistic the items are. People were less likely to feel positive about naturalistic-looking enrichment lying on the ground unused than about artificial enrichment actually being utilized by the animals in question. Now, this was a small study done with one animal group at one zoo, but this is a great start to, move on to quantifying some of this debate and trying to get some actual figures here. I'm not surprised by what this study found, by the way. The Melbourne Zoo in Australia has announced that their elephant herd is leaving the zoo. They will be moving to Werribee Open Range Zoo, both of which are owned by Zoos Victoria. The move will allow the 9-elephant herd, including some mother and infant pairs, to live in a brand new, state-of-the-art elephant habitat with more room to roam than ever before. Now, obviously, moving an elephant is a challenge, and moving a herd of them is even more challenging. So the zoo has already started training the herd for the move, even though the exhibit is still being constructed. They're getting them comfortable in their crates and making their time in them very positive. It's going to be a huge change for the Melbourne Zoo, but I'm excited to see the new exhibit at Werribee, and I think the elephants will love the new place. And now, since this episode is already destined to go long because of last week's deep dive, I'm going to do some quick hits from the past 2 weeks. The full solar eclipse is coming soon, the first one since 2017, and I've seen a lot of people asking if any precautions need to be taken for zoo animals, since people, and presumably most animals, are not supposed to look directly at the sun during a solar eclipse. Well, based on what many people who were working at zoos during the last full eclipse said, no precautions are necessary for the animals, most likely because, unlike many humans, most animals are not dumb enough to look directly at the sun. However, keepers have said that it is not uncommon for nocturnal animals to start to stir during the eclipse, which will only last a few minutes, for birds to give alarm calls during the darkness, and for other animals to start to show behaviors, stuff like as though it is the end of the day, like lining up to go off exhibit and stuff like that. However, once the eclipse passes, the animals will just go back to their normal behaviors in a short amount of time. The Maryland Zoo has officially announced the new animal that will be joining the zoo at the end of this year or early next year. The one I got all excited about on the pod 2 weeks ago. Yep, they're going to be building a red panda habitat. Yay! And yes, I've known this whole time. Haha, be jealous. But it was so hard not telling y'all. Anyway, the Cincinnati Zoo has announced that Fiona the hippo has an ear infection. The announcement came after her rabid fan base noticed that she was holding her ears very differently recently. Ear infections can be really persistent in hippos, but vets are treating it and are hopeful it will be resolved soon. Rocky, a beloved North American river otter I've had the pleasure of meeting at Elmwood Park Zoo, recently developed a small mass on his hip. The vet team at EPZ teamed up with Metropolitan Veterinary Associates and the University of Penn School of Veterinary Medicine to treat the problem, and they were able to remove the mass. Biopsy results revealed a low-grade tumor with a low risk of occurrence, and after a little time off exhibit, Rocky is back to his usual self, hanging out with his bestie Piper and having a blast. I love those otters so much, and if y'all haven't gone back and started at the beginning with this podcast, it was fairly early on that we shared the stories of Rocky and Piper, and they're good ones, y'all. I recommend you check it out. Zuri, a 14-year-old African elephant at the Kansas City Zoo, is officially on the mend after coming down with EEHV. Now, we've talked a lot about this disease, even done a full episode on it, so if you're not caught up, you can learn more on that episode, but this is a huge win. Anytime an elephant is able to beat the disease is a big deal, and the fact that the latest treatments, as well as detection methods developed by zoos studying this disease, worked out here is a really big deal. Yay, Zuri! We often talk about how the Oakland Zoo teams up with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to save injured mountain lions. Well, this time they teamed up to save a tiger. A female tiger that was living at a private facility was in such bad shape that the Department of Fish and Wildlife had to step in, and now the Oakland Zoo is caring for and rehabilitating the tiger. I love the amazing work the government and the zoo do together. I just do. Pop and rock icon Pink recently visited Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary, and our friend Tess from Trainer Talks and Tales got to introduce her to some animals, including flying a bird with her. That's just so cool, and I love Pink, and I love Tess, so I just wanted to share. Stone Zoo, one of two Zoo New England zoos, has recently powered on a 725 kilowatt solar power project, which will, in theory, provide 95% of the electricity needed to power the zoo. And if you would like to buy a zoo in Queensland, Australia, now is your chance. Darling Downs Zoo is for sale with an asking price around $6.5 million. The zoo is on 122 acres of rural land, is fully licensed, and currently has around 50,000 visitors annually. What say we get a Kickstarter going and buy a zoo, Rossifarians? What do you think? I'm kidding. Probably. Anyway, and then last but not least in the zoo news section, a new study came out recently that makes a lot of sense, but really got me thinking. We know that, for most species, living in zoos tends to lead to a much longer lifespan than they see in the wild. We also know that we are constantly improving welfare, husbandry standards, and veterinary practices, so it stands to reason that animals will only continue to live longer lives in the good zoos and aquariums. Well, do you know what almost always happens as lifespans grow in animals, including humans? You guessed it, cancer. So this paper posits that any improvement in animal husbandry which reduces premature deaths should, by default, lead to more cancer in the zoo-based population. The authors then go even further to say that, quote, cancer in zoo animals, like any other old age condition, might therefore be embraced as a proxy for good husbandry, end quote. It's definitely an interesting take and one that might seem counterintuitive at first, but when you think about it, it actually makes sense. In human statistics, the biggest risk factor for cancer is age. The study makes the point that taxa with high cancer rates in zoos are often carnivores that are often the longest living in relation to their expected lifespans in the wild. Definitely something interesting to think about, and something that makes a lot of sense to me. I really dug that study. And that brings us to Stereotypical Animal Podcast Theme Song. Here to bring you to conservation news. All right, so Colorado lawmakers have introduced a bipartisan bill to reintroduce wolverines into the state. The species is threatened, but has been extinct in Colorado since the early 1900s, despite being native to the state. They are actually one of the only species to go extinct in Colorado, but not fully extinct, that haven't been reintroduced to the state, so this bill would be a huge step in continuing the rewilding process there. And speaking of reintroductions, the bobwhite quail has been reintroduced to Pennsylvania, with 76 of the birds introduced in the initial population. The birds were released on the grounds of the Letterkenny Army Depot, meaning they are starting off on protected lands, though obviously they can fly away. There is one more release planned before spring breeding season, in which it is expected the population will multiply quickly. The birds have been unable to be found in Pennsylvania since 2014, due mostly to changes in land use that decimated the areas the birds could thrive in. In fact, the first step of reintroduction was to turn the land at the Army Depot into land that would be friendly to the birds, a process that started way back in 2017. This is a huge victory for the birds and conservationists, and I'm excited to see what the process leads to population-wise. These birds are kind of feast or famine because they're really good breeders, so like when there's room for them, there are a whole bunch of them, but when the land goes away, they go away very quickly. So hopefully this is a good start to a long-term reintroduction. An interesting study in the Caribbean has shown that coral larvae are more likely to settle on degraded reefs if they sound right. A dead or almost dead reef will not only lose its color, but will lose the vibrant sounds made by an ecosystem in movement. Apparently, those sounds can convince coral larvae to settle down and start to grow and reproduce, as scientists have discovered by sticking waterproof speakers underwater and playing the sounds the coral would naturally hear in a bustling, thriving reef. Now, once those corals start to repopulate, other animals will come back, and the pumped-in sounds can be replaced by the actual sounds of a reef starting to thrive again, which I find absolutely incredible. And then last but not least in conservation news, well, we can't talk about conservation without having some bad news. A study shows that it is very possible that the Arctic Ocean will be ice-free by the end of this decade if things don't change. Now, in this case, the term ice-free is defined as days with less than 386,000 square miles of ice, which, while that's something we don't want to see, really doesn't seem the same as ice-free to me. And look, I say that not to be controversial, but because I really think messaging has become a huge problem in the conservation science community. We want people to believe our message, but then we come out and say the Arctic Ocean could be ice-free by the end of the decade. But by ice-free, we mean it will still have what sounds like a whole lot of ice in it, and it won't be ice-free always or anything, just that there are some days in which there might not be any ice, except for the over 1/3 of a million square miles of ice that will still totally be there. And look, I'm not trying to downplay the very real concern that we are facing an Arctic Ocean that will have a lot less ice in it than we need it to have. I get it. Huge problem. We talk about ice stuff on here all the time. I'm simply saying that we also have to nail the messaging on these things, or else this will become another global warming versus climate change thing, where you have every smartass in the country standing outside when it's an unreasonably cold day and saying, global warming, huh? We just gotta get the messaging better. And that brings us to... A gator recently bit the hand off a fisherman on a Florida golf course. And look, I know that on the surface, that's not a funny story. It's not. It's a tragedy. But also, all I can picture when I read a story like that is Chubbs from Happy Gilmore and the gator that bit off his hand and all of that. And I'm a bad person. The point is that I'm a bad person. But I wish that person well and now want to go watch Happy Gilmore again. Anyway, and speaking of gators, authorities in Hamburg, New York, which is in the suburbs of Buffalo, meaning right near where I am currently recording this podcast, recently seized a, quote, ailing alligator that was being kept illegally as a pet. The 34-year-old alligator, named Albert, had lived with his human, Tony Cavallero, for 30 years, but the man's license to keep Albert expired in 2021. When Tony went to get the license renewed, authorities stated that he could not get a renewal because there was evidence that he let other people pet the gator and even go in the water with it, something that would lead to immediate removal in New York State under updated licensing requirements, but that previously hadn't been a problem for licensure. Keep in mind, this means that actually owning an alligator in New York State is not illegal if you do the proper paperwork, and didn't used to be illegal even to let people like pet it and stuff. This is kind of blowing my mind right now. But this is a particularly interesting case because it isn't the type of, situation you're probably imagining where the alligator lives in a bathtub or whatever. Cavallero has lived with Albert for more than half his life, refers to him as an emotional support animal, and built a $120,000 custom addition to his house for Albert that features heated floors, a filtered indoor pool with a waterfall and spa jet, tropical plants, and a bar, which I assume is for the human, not the gator. Anyway, there is also controversy surrounding the condition of the animal. The authorities that seized Albert claim that the gator is blind in both eyes and has spinal complications, but vet records show that the gator has cataracts, but not full blindness from them, and they're actually being treated. The records also show no spinal issues, leading Cavallero to imply they may have happened when the gator was carried away by the authorities. The government has declined to release the location where Albert is being held, other than to say that it is a licensed caretaker who will house the animal until it can be properly transported for permanent care. Cavallero's neighbors have petitioned for the return of Albert the gator, as have a bunch of random people who heard the story online. I'll be keeping an eye on this one for sure.
Oh, animal, animal holidays. Animal, animal holidays. Hey!
It remains March, which is the birth month of John Rossi. Woo! Also Dolphin Awareness Month, but yeah, mostly my birth month because March 31st is my birthday. Yay! And this episode is dropping on March 22nd, which is World Water Day and International Day of the Seal. The 23rd is National Chinchilla Day and World Bear Day and National Puppy Day. The 24th to the 30th is Lobo Week. The 25th is National Peacock Day and National Stork Day. The 26th is Cory Bustard Day, and the 27th is Manatee Appreciation Day. And those are your animal holidays for the week. But I also wanted to let you know that there is a movement going on right now to make April 1st the first ever International Tasmanian Devil Day. So while that's not this week, if any of you are following along on your Peppermint Narwhal animal holiday calendars or anything else, you should write that on in because it's the first time that they are trying to do this and make it a movement. And it's weird and hard to make a day, but yeah, I admire that they're doing that. So the day after my birthday, that's how y'all can remember it, because I know you know my birthday. I know I'm the worst. But yeah, no, April 1st, Tasmanian Devil Day, first one ever. Let's all go celebrate. All right, so there you have it, folks. Another episode of Rossifari Zoo News with a return to normalcy. Well, as normal as I ever get, anyway. I would like to take a moment to thank my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, and Jenny Owens, and to say thank you to all of my patrons and remind you all that you can support the podcast for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. I would also like to say thank you to everyone who contributed to Zoo News this week. Anya Keene, Colleen Lenahan, Kim Cooley-Croninger, Carrie Kirkpatrick, Kevin Williams, Sam Evans, Allie Gessner, Ren Olson, Becca Robinson, Barbara Bennett, Karen Musklow, Michaela Baratka, Ken Tryon, Kay Malensky, Allie Malensky, the Malenskys, News. Man, my voice is gone. Justin Williams, Jacob Zinn, Dr. Laura Shank, Elizabeth Dunlevy, Marianne Rossi, Elizabeth Charles, yes, Matt Patford, Taylor Gray, Dr. Zoe Rossi, Jay Meredith, and Rowena White. Thank you all so much for contributing to this week's episode. And remember, friends, the words newsy credits backwards are Styder Q1. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo. That developed in the bone of his caudal verbal